telling her friend about an arts festival, which is being held in the city where they are studying. First, you have some time to look at questions 1 and 2. Now we shall begin. You should answer the questions as you listen, because you will not hear the recording a second time. Listen carefully and answer questions 1 and 2.
Hi, Joanna. Where have you been?
Hi, Dave. I had to go into college to return a DVD I'd borrowed from the library.
Oh, right.
But while I was there, I got some information about the City Arts Festival that starts next week.
Oh, yeah? I saw a poster advertising it somewhere.
Yeah, and I picked up this leaflet from the library. It gives you the website address. So as I was there, I logged on to get more information. Actually, although they've got the full programme of events fixed now, you can't book online, which seems strange. There's a number to phone, though.
And are there student discounts?
I guess so, but I didn't notice. Anyway, there are 3 things I'd like to see. An Italian film, a rock concert, and an art exhibition.
Oh,
The exhibition's free, and you don't need to book, so I'll definitely go to that. But I'm going to get tickets for the film in case they sell out.
good idea. You can always buy concert tickets at the door because that's in a really big hall.
Right.
Before you listen to the rest of the conversation, you have some time to read questions 3 to 10. Now listen and answer questions 3 to 10.
So, when does the festival actually start?
Well, it's usually held the first week of October, but it's earlier this year for some reason. The opening night is September the 20th, and events go on till the end of the month.
And have you got that phone number?
Yeah, it's here. Look, it's 0967 990 776.
OK, I'll write it down. 0967 990 776. Thanks.
I thought the local council made a profit from the festival, but it says here that there's a commercial sponsor. It's a local bank. I didn't know that.
Neither did I. What other events have they got on?
As well as the art exhibitions and stuff that's open every day, there are special events each day. Like on Monday, there's a musical in the City Hall. That's only £3.65 for students.
I think I'll give that a miss. I've got football training on Mondays, but I'm free on Wednesday.
There's a jazz band on then, and that's only £2.50 for students.
Sounds good. Is that in the City Hall too? We could go.
Well, I'm busy actually, but it's at the sports centre if you're interested.
Oh, right.
Thursday's the cheapest event, only £1.25 for students, and it's on in the library. Can you guess what it is?
Probably the college choir.
Actually, no. They've not been asked, apparently.
Oh.
No, it's a poetry evening.
Isn't there any modern dance on anywhere?
On Friday. That's at the college. It's quite expensive, though. £15 for adults and £12.75 for students.
Oh, yes, that is a lot. If I'm going to spend that much, I'd prefer to go out on Saturday.
Yeah, me too. But on Saturday night, there isn't live music or a party or anything. Just the fireworks in the city park. And that's only £1.50.
Yeah, that'd be good.
That is the end of part 1.
You now have half a minute to check your answers.
Now turns to part 2.
Part 2.
You will hear 2 first-year engineering students discussing their project on devices which have been specially designed for use in developing countries.
First, look at questions 11 to 14. Listen carefully and decide which 4 planned developments are mentioned.
Hi, Aileen. Thanks for coming.
No problem. We've got our presentation coming up on Tuesday, so we need to get everything prepared now.
Yeah, so we're agreed that we're going to concentrate on these 2 devices which have particularly helped people in developing countries.
Yes, and we'll present the information in the form of a table, so it'll be really clear for non-specialists. We'll have 3 columns, using the headings we discussed in the last seminar.
OK, I've got those here. I'll make notes. So let's start with the clockwork radio and how it works. We'll obviously say how it's powered, i.e. that it's wound up.
Yeah, and we'll also need to explain how the energy is stored.
OK, in a spring.
Fine. Keep it simple. But we also need to say that the thing which makes the mechanism so special is the inclusion of a gearbox, which makes it possible to release energy extremely slowly. And that means that it can operate for a long time with minimal effort.
OK. Now, the next section is what are its benefits? I suppose we just need to emphasise that it costs a lot less than radios which use batteries. And if we want to, we can explain that these can cost as much as a week's wages in some parts of the world.
Absolutely. And related to that, of course, is the fact that people don't have to depend on buying anything in a store, which in remote rural areas is really important.
And then in the developments column, I think the most important thing we need to say is that the combination of the wind-up mechanism with a solar cell means that during the day it runs on the sun's energy, and you only have to wind it up when it's dark, which makes it a much more attractive option.
And that's probably that for the radio.
Yep.
Before the broadcast continues, look at questions 15 to 20. You will now listen to the second part of the talk.
So we'll then move on to the solar box cooker.
And again, let's keep the description of the mechanism very simple. We need to say that it uses sunlight rather than conventional fuels to cook food.
But we also need to explain two elements of why it's so efficient.
Yeah. The fact that sun's rays enter through a plastic cover.
Better call it a lid. I thought it was made of glass.
Not according to my research.
Okay.
And then we just say that light is transformed into heat and...
Because it has a longer wavelength means that it gets trapped.
And so it cooks the food.
Good. Right. And then where do we begin on the advantages? There's so many.
I suppose we have to begin with the fact that you no longer need to cut down trees, which brings a whole raft of other benefits in its turn.
Sure. And related to that, I think we need to say that because dung is no longer needed as a fuel for cooking, it can be used as a fertiliser.
Which leads to better harvests.
And then there's the fact that there is absolutely no smoke. I was reading somewhere that there's a huge incidence of lung complaints, especially among women and children who have to breathe in smoke from conventional cookers.
So that's another plus point.
Yep. And then we need to say something about the way cookboxes have been improved. I think we can emphasise the fact that a reflector is often added at an angle to the lid to maximise the amount of light entering.
Yes, good point. And also, I read about the fact that the floor or base of the box is raised, which improves heat retention.
Oh, and I think we should mention the fact that many of the new boxes have a sloping or inclined lid, which increases the surface area to capture the sun's rays.
Yes, that's a good point to finish on, I think.
So, I'll write up that table on an OHT if you like, and we're all set for our presentation.
Yes, great. If there's anything else that you think we should discuss...
That is the end of part 2.
You now have half a minute to check your answers.
Now turns to part 3.
Part 3.
You will hear two undergraduates doing a research methods course. A girl called Leela and a boy called Jake having a seminar with their tutor. Now you have some time to look at questions 21 to 24. Now listen and answer questions 21 to 24.
So, the task I gave you both was to choose an article about a small-scale research project.
Yes.
You were then required to try to reproduce the research procedures in your own context, i.e. try it out for yourselves.
Yeah, and that's what we've done.
Great. So I'd like you to tell me a bit about the article and why you chose it.
Well, the article's written by 2 university lecturers who had started using crosswords to help their students revise terminology for exams.
And the crosswords were designed and set on computers.
And we selected the article because, well, it seemed an accessible topic, even though we weren't familiar with the technique. You know, using IT to design crosswords for higher education.
That's a good reason. So these lecturers wanted to see how well this innovation was received by their students.
Yes.
So how did you go about reproducing the research?
Well, we drew up a list of terms from one of our own modules, and designed a crossword for revising these terms.
Then we asked our classmates to try out the crossword and give us feedback, their opinions on how they felt about using the technique.
Was it easy to find participants?
It wasn't easy at first, but then we convinced them that by taking part in the research, they were actually benefiting themselves by preparing for an exam which is coming up later this term.
And it worked.
Good. So how did you find out what the students thought about doing the crosswords?
A questionnaire. The original article used a 2-page long questionnaire. There were lots of excellent questions on it, but the whole section on difficulties using IT is now obsolete. Old-fashioned even though it had only been written a couple of years ago.
So you designed a shorter version?
Yeah. Then we sent it to the 40 students by email and got 28 replies. I was taken aback by the fact that everybody we talked to thought this was a good return. I mean, the responses were well written. People had taken a lot of care, but I was really disappointed with the low numbers.
Yes, an important lesson to learn for an apprentice researcher.
Yeah.
Now you have some time to look at questions 25 to 30. Now listen and answer questions 25 to 30.
So what results did you get?
Well, basically, the responses were extremely positive. The students said that doing the crossword on a computer helped them really focus on the work in hand and not be distracted, which is something that commonly happens with other ways of doing revision.
Yeah, that was really clear. But something that struck me was that having fun hardly featured in their responses, nor did anything to do with spelling of hard words, which I thought would be an obvious benefit.
No? Okay.
Respondents also said that doing the crossword hadn't really increased their general motivation to study, but that it had highlighted the gaps in their memory so they knew what further work was necessary.
Right. So how did your findings tally with those of the original researchers?
There were lots of similarities, but...
There were probably two main differences. We found that more males than females liked the technique, whereas the original study found the reverse.
Also, our respondents said they wouldn't mind doing a crossword as a final official exam, whereas in the original study, students said they would hate doing it even if it meant having a shorter test.
But of course, both sets of respondents said they'd be interested in doing more crosswords for informal purposes, revision, and so forth.
Right. So let's have a think about the whole project and what you've learned from doing it.
Well, it was very time-consuming.
Yeah, and I don't think we managed that aspect very well.
It could have been worse. I mean, we didn't have a lot of data, so we didn't have to spend ages processing it. And of course, we'd already done a course on numerical data processing, so there wasn't much new there.
Yeah, that's true. Anyway, I think we designed our questions well so that they gave us manageable data.
Yeah, it really helped having the original study to guide us, as it were. And that helped us to see what a good research instrument is.
What a good questionnaire should be like.
Absolutely. We got a lot from that. But when we were writing up the project, I'm not sure whether we'll know how to acknowledge the work of the original study. Our referencing.
No, that's something we'll both have to work on in the future.
Actually, that part's been great. Finding ways to share and support another person.
That's the real plus from the project, learning ways to do that.
Well, it's obviously been very successful.
That is the end of part 3.
You now have half a minute to check your answers.
Now turns to Part 4.
Part 4.
You are going to hear a talk given by Jim Allen. He is going to share some of his findings of his research. Now you have some time to look at questions 31 to 40. Now, listen carefully and answer questions 31 to 40.
Good morning. Today we'll be hailing from Jim Allen, who will be sharing some of the findings of his research project from last term. Jim.
Thanks. Well, to start with, a little bit of background about the project. As you can see, our title is something that is relevant to everybody in this part of the world: water safety. These days, there's a lot more to water safety because of the increasing number and range of boats and other things people use on public waterways. I'd become interested through reports on radio about the number of incidents involving small powerboats and individual watercraft such as jet skis. It seemed to me that because these craft were essentially recreational and didn't require licenses to use, there was very little opportunity to influence the users towards being safety conscious. So, I decided to make this the focus of the project. For the research, we mainly relied upon talking to people, asking them questions in preference to using a written questionnaire. We interviewed a wide range of people at a number of popular swimming locations over 2 consecutive weekends and asked them what they'd observed or experienced themselves. The respondents were both male and female, but the men were just slightly in the majority. We were pleased with their willingness to talk about the subject, and all told, interviewed 145 people over the 2 weekends. So, what were the findings? As you can see, 86% of people reported having had some type of problem. A surprisingly large percentage, 27%, commented that they had found it necessary to shout at an offending powerboat, but the main type of problem was the deafening sound that some of the boats made. On occasions, this led to swimmers deciding to move to another location. So what strategies did people adopt to ensure their own comfort and safety? Let's have a look at the figures. First, it was noticeable that there were often distinctly different answers between men and women. It was mainly the women, for example, who said they should try to choose places where boats couldn't go, whereas it was usually the men who said you shouldn't have to move if you were there first, so you should shout at them if necessary. Both men and, it was women who said you should call the authorities if the situation gets too dangerous or the powerboat drivers are acting irresponsibly. Then, I had thought it would be mainly women, but both sexes made the point that above all, it's important to get children away from any possible danger. Men were very aware that jet skis could be unpredictable in inexperienced hands. They also made the point that it's much safer to have your car nearby and clearly visible to any watercraft if you're swimming in a relatively remote spot. Finally, wearing visible clothing, men didn't think it was quite as important as women, but both gave it a high safety rating. When we asked them what they thought the government should do to help solve the problem,
That is the end of Part 4.
You now have half a minute to check your answers.